Okay, so we've looked now at several important pieces of evidence, and we're right in the middle of the evidence that really comes from our experience of mind. And this is important in this next category, in this next piece of evidence we're going to talk about, because free agency, your ability to think freely, to make free choices, is really tied to your notion of what it is making those free choices. Is this just a product of your mind or a product of your brain? Which is it? And this is an important distinction we have to make. Let me offer it to you this way. I once worked a case involving a residential burglar, and we watched him. I was working undercover. We watched him do a burglary. And afterwards, we took him to jail for the burglary, and I had a chance to learn more about him. And here's what I learned. I learned that his entire family was involved in this kind of crime. His dad had been a lifetime burglar. His brother had been a burglar. His dad was in custody for burglary. So was his brother. Also, I learned that he was taking, drugs at the time he did the crime. He was high at the time he did the crime. Now, you could argue, and I think he actually was inclined to do this with me as we were sitting talking about this, that, hey, I don't know how you can blame me for this. Because to be honest with you, this is in my family. It's in my bones. It's in my DNA. That's what we do. Everyone in my family does this kind of stuff. Not only that, my brain chemistry was altered by the narcotic. How could you blame somebody if, in fact, all their actions are tied to their DNA or tied to the physical nature of their brain? You can't blame someone for having blue eyes. That's just a product of their DNA and the structure of their eyes. Those are innate qualities we can't blame you for. How could you? Look, think about this. Can you blame this burglar? Can we prosecute him? Could we try him in court and find him guilty? Or did he really have no choice in the matter? If all he is a physical being who possesses a brain that's already pre-wired in a certain way and is now being affected chemically by drugs, it seems to me he's actually a victim here. He's not blameworthy at all. He's blameless. This is the problem if we assume that everything about us is merely physical. If we have brains but not minds, this presents a problem for us. And this is why, if we are in an atheistic universe made up of nothing more than space, time, and matter, a physical universe that can account for physical brains but cannot explain immaterial things like mind, well, then we've got a problem, because every action that you take is not a result of a free choice made in your non-material, non-physical mind, but is simply a consequence of the physical nature of your brain. A neuron fired. And why did it fire? Because a prior neuron fired. You had no control over all of those neurons. They're simply physical processes, dominoes that are falling against each other. And dominoes don't make choices. It's event causation rather than agent causation. Two different ways things are caused. When dominoes fall against each other, one event causes the next event. And none of these dominoes are personal agents that can decide not to fall. Just get out of the way. Dominoes can't do that. Physical structures like your brain cannot explain the kind of free agency that you and I experience every day. If we have minds that can act without the constraints and limits of the physical world, which is always just a series of consequences of prior events that occurred, if we can't make those kinds of free choices, then number one, we can't be blamed for any of our actions, because really we didn't do it. The physical nature of our bodies did it. Two, we can't really rationally think because we can't choose freely between rational options. Three, we can't be creative because we're not making choices that you could call creativity. We can't even love because that's something we must choose to do freely, or it really has no meaning. As a matter of fact, the most important things that you think are part of your experience as a human, love, rationality, creativity, and even culpability, are not available to you if all you are is a brain that is being acted upon by physical events. So the idea of free agency is rather difficult to explain from standing inside the room of the physical universe. And people have tried to explain it. As a matter of fact, there are many people who would just reject that we really have this kind of free agency. As a matter of fact, Sam Harris, who's a neuroscientist and a philosopher and is an atheist, says that this is entirely an illusion. This idea that you have free agency, well, not quite so, because you cannot control the neurons that fire in your brain. And this goes back all the way, by the way. The first domino is at the very beginning of the universe, and it sets in course a series of dominoes that fall that lead up to today. All of this was predetermined by your physics. Now, if that's the case, we cannot do all those things we just talked about, and we cannot be held accountable. So let's talk about this for a second. How are we going to explain this? By staying inside the room. I can explain brain. I get that. We can explain brain, but how do we explain mind? I can explain the physical determinism of your physical brain, but how do I explain the free agency we seem to experience as minds that think freely? Now, we're going to talk about some of the ways that people try to stay inside the room for an explanation for free agency, and we're going to describe those in your participants guide. But I just want to kind of skip across a couple of these so you can kind of see why these don't work. Look, some people will say, well, if the activity in your brain is at the quantum level, well, we know at the quantum level that there's not the same kind of causal relationships. So, like, for example, at the quantum level, things pop into existence without really any necessary cause. What if your mental activity is actually physical activity in your brain that is occurring at the quantum level? Well, that means it would be rather indeterminate. And so it's not going to be predetermined. It's not going to be like a series of dominoes. These things emerge like thoughts emerge, and they need no prior cause. But think about that for a second. Are we really willing to say that our thoughts are entirely indeterminate? Well, then why would you trust your thoughts? If this is just quantum activity popping into existence, why would we have any confidence that the quantum activity is connected even to a chain of logic? I think that's rather scary, actually. To assume that your thoughts are entirely disconnected from anything and just pop into existence at the quantum level means that I really don't know if what I'm saying right now makes any sense at all or where it even came from, because they're entirely indeterminate. So I don't know that the quantum theories for thoughts are ever going to really solve the problem. There are some people who think this just emerged mysteriously at the end of a physical process, that this idea of free agency simply emerges even though all the factors that lead up to its emergence are constrained as event causes, event causation, that suddenly agent causation emerges. But I'm not sure we could ever find a way to demonstrate that evidentially. It's a theory. I'm sure we can say, well, it's just so because I say it so, but it doesn't mean it's actually evidentially true. Look, every effort, and here's the diagram, every effort to describe the universe in such a way as to account for free agency from within the constructs of just space, time, and matter, guess what? It doesn't work. Now, there's another way to explain free agency, right? It's kind of the way we explain mind. If there is a mind that is the creator of everything, that acts freely to create when it did not have to, and then it creates beings that are also minds that can act freely. In other words, it creates in its image. So take a look at this list. This is our suspect description that has emerged after 6 pieces of evidence. We are looking for an uncaused first cause that is all-powerful, that is spaceless, timeless, non-material, that is the fine-tuner that has fine-tuned a universe with the purpose of achieving life in the universe, that is the author of the code, DNA code, that is so important to life, that is the designer behind the design, appearance of design we see in biology, that is the mind that creates beings in its image, that also acts freely, that creates when it didn't have to. It creates beings that have minds that also act freely. Now look at this list. That's a robust set of characteristics. And what are we describing here? One thing we know for sure, nothing inside the room of the universe can actually account for this growing suspect profile. Once again, we're looking for a cause for all the stuff we see in the room that is still outside the room.